to music first, always.
We are unstoppable.
Open the frontiers to make people meet people.
Music is not fireworks. Music is feeling.
You're good to go.
Thank you, vote for the music.
This is Vote for the Music, the Eurovision podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Vote for the Music, the Eurovision podcast. I'm Benjamin Tadeusz.
And I'm Tadeusz.
Now, since the end of the national final season, we have been releasing our quickfire reviews of the Eurovision Song Contest 2024, starting with the first semi-final, then onto the second semi-final. Both are now complete. It's only the big five to go. So like we did before, we're now presenting to you all of our quickfire reviews of the second half of the second semi-final. Those are the 7 songs from Latvia through to the Netherlands. So that means Latvia is where we begin first, and that is our thoughts on the song Hollow by Dons.
It's killing me slow, trying to make me just another believer. Everybody just pretending they're preachers.
Now, first of all, I will say, when I first heard this song back during Supernova, which was Latvia's national final, I was imminently underwhelmed, but I was entirely sure it was going to become Latvia's entry. For me, it's a definition of try-hard generic. I mean, honestly, it sounds like something which would come last or second to last in a Melody Festival in Heat. It's actually got quite a strong sort of Swedish ballad pop sound. The only thing about it really that screams Latvia is just how hard it's trying, and the fact the relative quality isn't that high. And it doesn't help that during the performance, it can come across as quite comical in a way. And I think part of that is the serious tone of the lyrics, matched with the overall quality of the song. For me, I think the song is quite poor, but the tone and mood of the lyrics certainly bring it down to levels of comedy.
The lyrics describe emotional/identity crisis that is actually pretty universal, with religious theme being justified by comparing various advice and criticism offered by the environment to the attempts at conversion or preaching. Interestingly, religious allusions come without either praising or attacking religion itself. Now, I usually don't pay attention to lyrics, however, Hollow as a whole is a good example how to encourage the viewer to look them up. Both the grim melody and the philosophical music video are already alluding to the theme, pointing out the importance of understanding the lyrics correctly.
As I said, I just can't agree. I think the lyrics are over the top. I think they're preachy. I think they come across as annoying. They come across as a bit too melodramatic, especially, as I say, for the relative quality of the song and the way Dons performs it. It just seems like a parody of a Joy Folk Eurovision song that perhaps you would have seen in the Eurovision movie or something.
All of this was done at the cost of expressing substance through production and melody, which is the primary medium utilized by songs, but also what Eurovision generally favors. It does offer universal and familiar simplicity, however it doesn't go for any tricks to stand out from the crowd.
I mean, it's just a boring song. Honestly, I think it is going to be the toilet break song at the semis where people go, this is boring, I'll go to the loo. Although I would disagree with you about the production. I think the production is one of the strongest elements of this, but it is also one of the elements that is going the most sort of, we're trying so hard. As I say again and again, this is what this entry is doing. It's got so much of like, we really want to get a big score on the jury points. We really want to get through. We really want to get a good result, but without putting the work in. So it's superficial with this sort of Scandinavian, Swedish Melody Festivalen ballad production without anything else to back it up. To Don's credit, I think he's a good vocalist, but I think he lacks any charisma, any charm, or any sort of stage presence. However, I would say that Dons as a person has all of that. I've seen him on social media, I've seen him at the pre-parties, backstage, seem really entertaining, seem really charismatic, seem like a really great guy. And I generally do really like him. But on stage, all of that vanishes, and he just turns into a crying bald man. He mimight be Dons backstage, but on stage he's Tony Kipiani, who had perhaps the flattest performance you could ever imagine, with actually a song fairly similar to this. I think with the exception of the production, I think these are fairly similar songs. So placing this in the televote only semi-final, I think is a recipe for disaster, because if this was ever going to appeal to anyone, it would be the juries, which even if this got to the final, I don't think is really going to appeal to them much in the face of lots of other entries which they could have in return. So I think with televoters, this just stands very, very little chance. I would be immensely surprised if this got through to the final.
While I can't count out such a possibility, I disagree because in my opinion, Hollow stands out by how much it is not playing by the rules of Eurovision. Especially this year, we've got a lot of heavily produced pop songs of varying quality. Meanwhile, Hollow is just a very simple ballad that you could easily play on the piano, making it different than the rest of the crowd and thus potentially memorable to the audience. This is easily their best shot at qualifying, although it's not guaranteed to work and will also require dance to pull off flawless vocal performance. However, he's an experienced singer, so I believe that he can do this.
Well, as I said before, Supernova performances were fine vocally, but really lacked any charisma on stage. But when you actually got to his pre-party performances, not only did he lack any charisma on stage, but I think his vocals were pretty shaky as well there. Hopefully that improves the Eurovision, but they weren't great. And also, I think pretty much all of them, it was one of the only performances where you could audibly hear people just talking over the song, which is not great either. But yeah, shaky vocals at some of those pre-parties could be an issue.
He never made any major mistakes, so I believe the semi-final version will be polished to the very last note. All this makes whether Latvia qualifies or not this year a one big question mark. I personally hope it does.
I have a very strong feeling, for all the reasons I've described already, you're going to be very, very disappointed. I just don't see this appealing to anyone. I don't see this encouraging anyone to pick up the phone to vote for it. I think the only caveat to that, the only way this could get through, is just out of the sheer lack of songs in this genre or songs in any sort of slow tempo ballad genre, because we have got a big deficit of those this year. But I don't think televoters really think in reference to the other songs. I think most televoters just vote for one song and they vote for whichever one stands out to them the most. And I can't see many people going, Latvia is the one I'm going to go for.
A simple, heartfelt and relatable message is just what I needed at this stage of my life. Hollow is not a groundbreaking song. However, it is an honest song and it's a great song as far as I'm concerned. And I would love if Europe ended up appreciating it as well.
Well, I mean, Latvia have tried every trick in the book since their non-qualification streak started back in 2017, and I don't feel that streak's going to come to an end this year. It just screams of desperation of them trying everything they possibly can because they just can't get into that final. Let's think about how bad Latvia's non-qualification record is. Since 2009, they have only been in the final twice. That is twice out of 14 times. Perhaps twice out of 15 times after this year. I just think Latvia as a country, as a delegation, as a national final, as an audience in Latvia, just don't get the contest. I think Hollow encapsulates all of that, and I think this is almost certainly going to stay in that semi-final because it doesn't speak to me, and I really don't think it's going to speak to Europe. So those were our thoughts on Latvia's entry for this year's Eurovision Song Contest. Next in the running order, we come to the San Marinese entry, which is 1111 by MEGARA.
Explaining what happened with San Marino surpasses my analytic skills.
Well, to put it very, very simply, I say simply, let's see how I go. MEGARA entered Benidorm Fest, which is Spain's national final, last year and finished 4th place. Presumably, they entered into Benidorm Fest 2024, didn't make the cut, so then entered into Una Bocce per San Marino 2024 through the open auditions, not through the established artist route, which we're not quite sure why. Anyway, they went through those auditions, They got into the semi-finals. They didn't actually make the final first try, but they got through the second chance round and they made the Una Voce per San Marino final. But meanwhile, one of Italy's biggest stars and Sanremo 2024 contestant Loredana Bertè was announced as competing in Una Voce per San Marino through the big artist round, which meant she automatically got through into that final. She was expected to win. Everyone thought she was going to win. She's one of Italy's biggest stars. She's really famous. It's absolutely who I think the broadcaster wanted to win. It was pretty much a shoo-in. And then out of nowhere, to the surprise of pretty much everyone, including a lot of the Spanish fandom who didn't even realise what was going on at this point until it was announced, MEGARA managed to win. Yes, a group which didn't even win their semi-final, which went through a second chance round, went through open auditions, ended up winning against Loredana Bertè, who, if you don't know who she is a big deal. I mean, the audience in the auditorium weren't happy. They just started walking out when MEGARA had won. It means we have a Spanish band who came 4th in the Spain's national selection last year, representing San Marino, which is also quite ironic because, as you'll find out next week when we get onto Spain's entry, their entry, Nebulosa, entered Una Voce per San Marino 2023 and then ended up winning Benidorm Fest this year. So it's funny the way things turn out.
However, it seems that 11-11 just fell flat. Last place in the odds, 33rd place in my Eurovision scoreboard. Nobody really sees it as a qualifier either. What happened here? The bad live performance? Not really. Most people didn't ever hear it. Nobody watches Una Voce per San Marino, and the music video ended up reaching far wider circles.
Once again, you can't really judge an act based on their performance in some of these national finals. A lot of them, you absolutely can, but in some of them which have very poor cheap production quality, very poor sound engineering, it's just not fair. Like with perhaps Moldova or Ireland, it's just not really possible to get a good sense of what the performance is like because the whole medium is working against it. However, yes, the music video has been far more shared and people have absolutely had ample opportunity to hear the studio version, and still it's not cutting through.
But it seems a little story about MEGARA struggling with a music label and ultimately forcing them to submission didn't resonate with audiences either. And that's pretty much all that can be said. Didn't resonate. Rock genre is all about emotion. If the emotion isn't delivered, or the listeners fail to see this emotion, then the song is completely dead. It seems that has been the case with 11-11. Which I personally find a shame because I really like the song. I enjoyed it at first listen, and I've only grown to enjoy it more over time. It's a fun, energetic ride. One can claim the refrain lacks the special energy spike, but that is because energy is all the way in.
Actually, interestingly, the chorus is one of the only parts of this song I do like, because overall, I'm not that much of a fan, but I do actually really like the chorus. I think the chorus is quite catchy. I think the hooks are strong there. I think that works quite well. But as a whole, yeah, I'm not really a fan of this. Do I think it's going to qualify? I mean, actually, I wouldn't rule it out. I think if we're going to get a shot qualify, it could be this. We are in a televote-only semi-final. San Marino and MEGARA are probably going to pull out all the stops on the staging. Like, I think it's going to be absolutely crazy on stage. And a big, energetic rock song could absolutely capture the audience in a way on stage in Malmö it's not captured as in the music video or in Una Voce per San Marino. So I would not actually rule out qualification. And like pretty much everyone else who thinks this is a dead cert non-qualify, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the song, I really think there is a chance this could go through. If it does go through, I mean, we're talking 10th, 9th place, it will only just get through. But I do think it is a very real possibility.
So those are our thoughts on the San Marinese entry for this year's Eurovision Song Contest. So next in the running order, we come to Georgia's entry, which is Firefighter by Nutsa, Buzaladze.
I would say that Georgia sold its soul to the devil, but looking at their history, it's more like they set up an auction and see which devil can offer them successful qualification. The devil they tried this time is Darko Dimitrov, seasoned Eurovision composer, known for Kurna, Kazimi Kazimikoi, and a lot of Eurovision entries that I don't like. Firefighter is going to join that last rich category. This song is loud and naughty, like Loco Loco, pretentious and full of itself, like Proud, while in fact it's a very basic composition, looped in a way that makes sure that you're going to remember it, no matter whether you like it or not.
Yes, this isn't the most inspired thing in the world. I do think this is a very typical entry, and I think in some ways it's a very safe entry. But I think it's certainly the best effort Georgia have offered us since they last qualified.
Yes, you mentioned the fact that they've gone and got a successful composer as selling their soul to the devil, but also they've just gone and hired a successful composer. It's just a successful composer that you don't personally like. So that's literally just a taste difference there. Which I know, this is a review, it's subjective, but that's how it works. But I think entries that he's written have been very good, have done their job very well, and have, for good reason, got good results. One of the comparisons you make is to Loco Loco. I think that's a very apt comparison to this. That was a song which wasn't saying much, wasn't doing much, wasn't even necessarily expected to do amazingly well, it was just there to exist, to perform, to have a good time. And actually, it ended up getting quite a good reception and a fairly good result in Rotterdam. And I think Firefighter could be that one. So I think it's got so much potential in that song. If you just listen to it, there's so many ways they could stage that, so many ways they could perform that, that could actually really blow people away. Likewise, it also has the potential to do the opposite, but so do a lot of songs.
But my main problem is really just how blatantly artificial all of this is. There is no bigger idea behind this song. It's just another dance pop number for Eurovision. Kind of like Fuego, but kinda not. It's loud, it has dancing, it has simple lyrics with the most obvious metaphor in history. It crossed every mark on the Eurovision checklist.
And that's the important thing. I think actually this is apt to compare to Latvia, which we covered a few days ago. They're two on a very, very long non-qualification streak to have entered something which potentially sounds more generic than they have otherwise sent since they're non-qualified, but people think has a better chance than lots of other things. But I think Firefighter manages to pull the stops out because one, it's just a lot catchier. Two, there's a far higher chance of a really strong stage show here. And three, I think Nutsa's performance is actually going to really wow people. She can sing. Now, I'm not saying that Dons can't, but I think I already went into all the reasons why I think Dons might struggle in that episode, so you can go back and listen to that. Because I think those are two very interesting countries to compare, and I think Georgia will end up doing substantially better.
Obviously this will qualify, it's loud and catchy enough. So I guess Georgia finally gets their redemption.
And that they finally do, because I'd be shocked if this did not qualify. I suppose its only downfall could be if they did stage it badly, if they did perform badly, if people did say it as too generic. While it could be seen that this is a bit dated, because yeah, it is. This sounds like a Eurovision entry from 2017, not necessarily 2024. There's also, like Armenia, for example, the fact that because the contest has moved on, there's nothing quite like this there anymore, and this could really stand out. The only thing it's really fighting against is Albania, and this is miles better. So absolutely, this is going to qualify. I think the televote will rally behind this. I'm not necessarily sure how it was in the final, but then again, I think that if anything's going to completely surprise us in the final, it very well could be Georgia, because it does have all the potential just to cut through. As for my actual personal opinion on this song, because I don't think I've actually said apart from how I think it would do, I think it's alright. I think it's fairly above average. It's everything it needs to do as well as it needs to do, but it doesn't go any further beyond. I guess that could be a problem at the Eurovision Song Contest, but there's always an entry in there which isn't the most spectacular that does cut through and does capture people and does get a surprising good result, and I think that will be Georgia this year. So those were our thoughts on Georgia's entry for this year's Eurovision Song Contest. So then moving through our running order, we get to the Belgian entry, which is called When the Party's Over by Mustii.
Before the party is over. Before the party is over.
Now, I just want to begin this review by saying that when I first heard this song, I really liked it. Although I don't think it would be the song to win the Eurovision Song Contest, certainly on first listen, I saw it as a possibility. However, unfortunately for Mustii and for Belgium, in the opposite way to last year's Belgian entry, where that just got better and better and better, this seems to be just getting worse and worse and worse. This seems to, on the same way I have annoyances with something like Hollow by Dons, which is the Latvian entry, I have those same annoyances with this one. It's just this entry masks it and hides it a lot better. But when it comes to it, this is just an entry that is trying so hard to sound like a Eurovision winner. It ends up just sounding irritating, obnoxious, and annoying.
There's a reason we don't see songs like this that often on Eurovision. The key to winning Eurovision is not just the show, but longevity. It's not enough to make an experience on stage, you have to make an experience that lasts and can be repeated, even without your involvement. Did Mustii include it in his song? Not quite. This is why I only ever perceived this song as fine, and it's also a reason why many of its initial fans, after few weeks, started to turn away from the song. It's no longer considered a winning contender as it initially was. The show just got old.
Again, that's exactly what I felt. Every single time I heard this, every single time I saw Mustii perform this, it just got worse and worse. The initial captivating effect filtered away, and all I could see was Mustii screaming that final before the party is over thing over and over repeatedly in that final chorus, and honestly just laughing at it because it's so over the top, it's so ridiculous, it's so silly, I can't take it seriously. And if that's the bit they choose to put in the recaps during the shows, then honestly, I think that could actually harm him, because it's that bit which is once repeated over and over again, you go, oh, that is a bit much.
Now, will Belgium qualify? Definitely. Mustii can sing, and all he has to do is to recreate what was done in music video on stage. Many people will hear his song for the first time during the semi-final, and they will be caught by the same effect fans were.
Now, while I won't rule this out, because obviously I was caught by this effect, so I think it's certainly possible the general public are, I think there's a couple of things which could actually potentially stop that from happening. I think that does include the fact we've got two proper Eurovision winner contenders in this semi-final, that is Switzerland and the Netherlands. So having Belgium thrown in with those two could make people just ignore it and actually just not even notice Belgium, because there are two big contenders in the same show. And then secondly, I don't know whether Mustie's vocals are going to be up to scratch. I know you said he can sing, and he can sing, by the way, but he can't sing all the time. I've now seen 2 television performances of him recently where he sounds absolutely awful. And I'm not trying to be mean here, but the vocals absolutely stink. That's in 2 recent TV performances. His 2 most recent performances of the song. Also, if you go back to pre-party season, although at the beginning he sounded fine, if you look at those very late performances, they're getting worse and worse and worse. I think Mustie's really suffering from vocal fatigue, and I really worry this. After 2 weeks of intensive rehearsals in Malmö on that stage, is the same thing going to happen, and is he going to get worse and worse and worse? Is his best performance of this song going to be that very first rehearsal, which I believe is this coming Tuesday? Because based on what I've seen and what he's like vocally, I think that's quite likely. I feel like his best performance will be this Tuesday, and his worst performance will be next Thursday, and that to me doesn't guarantee him a place in the final. I think obviously this seems like a qualifier, it seems like such a qualifier off the basis of it. It sounds like a qualifier, it feels top 10 even, but if we get any shock non-qualifier this year, I really think it's going to be Belgium, because I think vocally this can end up seeming difficult to listen to. As I say, for some artists, 2 weeks of intensive rehearsals really helps them. Some artists, 2 weeks of intensive rehearsals can really harm them. And for Mustii, I think it's going to harm him.
Mustii made everything in its power to make sure that everyone is going to love him before the Eurovision party is over. However, will his song still be remembered after the party is over? Time will tell.
Overall, for me, this is quite an average song, which is just covered in everything about the production, everything about the way it's performed, being absolutely over the top and giving it everything. They're literally throwing the kitchen sink at this. This is giving so much I really want to win energy, but I just don't think the quality matches up to it. I think it is annoying. I think it is obnoxious. I think it's in your face, and I think it very well could backfire, and I think this could be a shock non-qualifier. What it's worth, if I actually had to do the predictions, I think this would make it through into the final, but if anything that we expect to make it through to the final won't, I think it'll be this one.
So those were both of our thoughts on the Belgian entry for this year's Eurovision Song Contest. Then on to song 13 in the running order, and we get to Estonia's entry. It's by Firefighters and Puuluup, and the title I cannot even attempt to pronounce, but my co-host can, so I'll let him do it.
Nendest, narkootikumidest, küll, midagi. Nendest, narkootikumidest, küll, midagi is simply a masterpiece in viral. This is my winner of 2024, fast catchy beat, unique dance routine, loud baritone voices, just the overall feeling of fun and party. And on top of that, two funny stories about a bunch of drug dealers caught red-handed on their act who try to ensure the police died that they totally don't know what the drugs are and don't know anything about these drugs, as well as interesting little gang war between the worlds of hip-hop and folk in the music video. What Vistminus and Puuluup created is not a high art, but it's a high pop. The song created by people for people to make sure that everyone has a great time, entertainment at its purest and most honest. And I, for one, am sold. Count me in.
And I, for one, am not sold. I've never liked this song from the beginning. It just encapsulates everything about the Eurovision Song Contest that I don't really like. I don't think it has much charm. I don't think it has much quality. I don't think it's very listenable. But what is interesting is the fact that people that like this really like this and call it a masterpiece and the greatest thing ever, just like my co-host has just done. There's plenty of other people I've seen do the same. And the people who don't like it have just gone, what's the fuss? Why do you like this so much? Although there's been debate about whether it is actually a novelty entry, whether it can be called a novelty entry. I don't think that's important because I think most of the general public will watch this in the semi-final and see it and perceive it as a novelty entry. And although if we compare what Estonia was sending in 2008, for example, with Let's Svet, this is infinitely better, I do think it is also fair to make the comparison to it being like an entry from Eurovision 2008. And for me, just like those entries at the time didn't work, this entry doesn't work for me now.
Being a natural crowd pleaser, I believe Estonia is a lock-in for qualification. Some people doubt its chances, but I don't think they take into account that this was one of the earliest published songs. People in Malmö will hear it for the first time and will be just as charmed as we initially were.
I mean, as you initially were, and a bunch of other fans, yes, that's true, but I don't think that is indicative of the whole fan opinion either, because I think this song's always been fairly 50-50 about whether people like it or not. And then I think also you need to look at what this is up against in the semi-final, because firstly, as I said before, the audience will perceive this as a novelty entry. And literally, only a few songs later, this is song number 13, the Netherlands is song number 16, and that is probably the best novelty perceived entry in the contest. It's almost certainly going to be the song to win at the televote. And that coming so soon after Estonia, honestly, I think will just make people forget about Estonia or see Estonia as far worse than it. I actually did a run through of both semi-finals in running order with the music videos with a few other Eurovision fans, and everyone, no matter what their views of Estonia were beforehand, went, oh, you kind of forget about Estonia, don't you? And yes, you do. So that is going to make it quite difficult just as sort of a one-on-one comparison between the two, because they're almost in a head-to-head match there because of the running order. Then also you've got to consider the fact that, as I said earlier, this sounds like an entry from Eurovision 2008. And there's another song in the semi-final which I think is indefinitely better, which also sounds like an entry from the Eurovision 2008, which is Armenia's entry. And that one is just fundamentally a far better song and will have much more wide appeal. And I think Estonia's going to be fighting subconscious comparisons in the audience's mind with Europapa and with Yako, and I think that's really going to harm it. Do I think it's going to qualify though? I do think more than likely it probably will in 10th, 9th, 8th place or something, because yes, again, this is a televote only semi-final. It probably will get just enough votes to get it through, but I don't think this is going to be very high up in that table, and if it does get to the grand final, it's absolutely, I think we're looking at bottom 3 to be honest, because I just don't see why anyone would vote for it in the grand final when there's far better options for the audience it's trying to appeal for.
So those were our thoughts there for Estonia's entry for this year's Eurovision Song Contest. We're not going to be looking at Song 14, which is the entry from Israel. This is due in part to Israel as a nation's disproportionate response to the Hamas terrorist attack which took place on October 7th, alongside their continual attempts to enter a song which reflected this politically, and repeated violations of the EBU's broadcasting code made by national broadcaster Can. In place of this review, before we move on to Norway, I would like to invite anyone who is listening to go to the website bit.ly/Eurofansgive, which gives links to plenty of organisations and places where, as a community, we can do our bit to help while Israel use this platform to try and artwash their atrocities. Thank you very much for listening. But moving on, we shall continue forward with Norway's entry for this year's Eurovision Song Contest. And that is Ulveham by Gåte.
Norway, with typical for them precision, checked out all the boxes to become the televote darling, and they're going to become one. It's hard to find someone who wouldn't like Ulveham, and it's not going to be me either. Gåte did excellent job all the way. That probably is going to secure them the top 10 finish.
Well, yes, I mean, I think this is utterly brilliant, and if you've not seen this live, which I have, I had the pleasure of seeing them at the Malfest weekend pre-party, then you're missing out because it is absolutely breathtaking live. I would be really surprised if this did not come top 10. I think it has a hugely wide appeal. I think it's definitely the best rock entry we have in the contest this year. It's also got a huge, obviously, folk feel, and it's by a band with a really sort of cool image, which I think will absolutely capture people watching the show. For me, this is like the Norwegian version of Shum by Gåte, and I think it will end up getting quite a similar result.
Ulveham speaks of princesses, wolves, werewolves, dark magic, and many other very familiar items. It's not just a story, it's a tale. A fairy tale, if you wish. But fun and interesting that this fairy tale may be. Haven't we heard a fairy tale from Norway before?
Well, yes, quite, but I'm not sure many viewers will make that connection, specifically because this is sort of a dark type fairy tale, which doesn't even get across in the lyrics, but just in the mood and the feel, in that sort of twisted fairy tale. Whereas Alexander Rybak's fairy tale was very much sort of a wide-eyed teenage fantasy at a woman who seemed unbelievable and didn't exist. So absolutely, I don't think that's going to be any sort of problem here. And actually, I think this sort of fairy tale is actually far more on vogue than the other one, as of where we stand at the moment in sort of the current tastes in the music industry.
Their qualification to the final is also certain. The one thing that is not certain, however, is whether they can bring a victory. Norway did all their homework, but lacks the X factor. The one thing that would make it stand out from the crowd and make it the entry. They would be a serious contender if no one had found this X factor this year, as has happened once or twice in Eurovision history. But this is not the case this year. We already have plenty of potential winning contenders. Why would Norway win?
Yes, as much as I like this, and I really, really do like this, by the way, it's very high in my ranking, I would have to agree, I don't think this is going to win the Eurovision Song Contest this year. It just doesn't have the extra something which is going, oh, this is a winner. But, you know, things could change, rehearsals can happen. However, because we have got a national final performance, which is a very polished, very slick national final performance, which is very likely not going to change much at all. On stage in Malmö, it's probably going to basically be exactly the same thing. I think we can pretty much get an idea of exactly what this Eurovision performance will look like. So I don't think we're going to get any surprises there with Norway. It's only if other stuff falls back and surprisingly fails. But I don't think that's going to happen either. Top 10, very likely. I think that's almost a dead cert win. I can't see it happening. But I do really, really like this. So those are our thoughts on Norway's entry for this year's Eurovision Song Contest, which brings us right to the very end of our running order. Song 16, the very last in the second semi-final. Before we, of course, move on to the big five in the coming days, we get to the Netherlands, which is the song Europapa by Joost Klein. First of all, I think we are talking about what is almost certainly an entry that is going to finish very, very high up on the scoreboard in a fortnight's time. I think this could even be a contender to win. In fact, I'd probably say it's the second most likely to win, only next to Switzerland. And I think this is a dead cert to win the televote. I think this is going to do very, very well. And I think the Netherlands can be very proud of themselves for that, for being able to transform their participation after the disastrous year they had last year, which wasn't just limited to the song, but also numerous things in the delegation around it. However, if we're going to talk about Europapa itself as a song, I mean, it is absolutely everything, but done in the most charming, interesting, enjoyable and fun way possible. While it riffs on the kind of what Carrier for Finland wanted to do last year, it does it in an entirely different way, has its own spin on it, goes off in its whole other direction and becomes a very personal, emotional message. I think it's absolutely genius. While Cha 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 used rap and pop and Schlager mixed with rock, this riffs off the same motifs but does it with heavy electronic Eurodance and hardcore trance, almost in the style of Too Unlimited from the 90s, but put up a notch. It's absolutely balmy, but it all works incredibly well as a whole cohesive pop song. This is going to send the crowd absolutely crazy, much the same way they did for Finland last year. And I honestly think this is going to steal votes away from acts like Croatia, which is trying to do a similar thing, but I think not nearly as good or as polished as this. And also, I think this is going to steal votes from Austria, We Will Rave, which is also trying to do the 90s Eurodance type thing. And, well, this does it 100 million times better. And I think this entry will overshadow both of those two and be an absolute televote magnet.
Klein is the kind of artist that you either love or hate based on who he just is. So there's no point in me explaining to you why Europapa is great. Instead, let's talk about its ending, as it is crucial for its victory chances. It's this ending which elevates the simple pop track to something very personal. A love letter from Joost to his late father. And this is no cheap X Factor trick either. Joost makes it very clear with how he performs it that this matter really means a lot to him. The tone, the tempo, the contrast, everything captures an audience and gives it a feeling of participating in something special, profound. Even if they don't understand the words, they are in a way included in this experience. That ending is what makes Europapa truly special and may potentially grant the Eurovision trophy.
Oh, I mean, the outro is absolute genius, and we do know for a fact is going to be in the Eurovision performance, so there's no doubt about that. You don't have to worry about that. I know on the studio version he hasn't included it, but it is included if you look on Spotify. It has Europapa, the song, and then it has Europapa outro, which is an extended sort of 1 minute long outro of what you hear in the music video, which basically, it's basically done just because it counts as 2 streams. So if you stream Europapa and Europapa outro, it counts as 2 streams instead of 1 stream, and that counts as the same song, so it charts higher. It's a music industry thing. But anyway, we know that's irrelevant for the Eurovision Song Contest because it's going to be there on the stage, and I think that's going to be an absolutely magical moment. Really looking forward to see how they execute that.
This ending would have to be staged very carefully, with sudden tone change in the entirety of the performance. However, well executed, it would be exactly what Netherlands needs to win. Something to one-up every other participating act. A brand new achievement in Eurovision stage direction, comparable to Channel's Dance Break.
And I think just like we had with Spain, after their rehearsal, they started being considered a proper contender where they hadn't before. And I think once the Netherlands rehearse on Tuesday, people are going to be talking far more about the Netherlands and far less about Croatia. Because as I said, I think the Netherlands is going to be the stronger overall package of that. And I think it's going to be the one the voters will, in the final, gravitate toward. Honestly, I really don't see a reality where this does not come top 3. And I think with almost near certainty, it is winning the televote.
The bookies underestimated him at first, and that was a mistake. Because once Europapa arrived, it became very clear that the Netherlands may win this whole thing once again. One thing it's definitely winning is the semi-final. They already had big chances, but the last place in the running order basically guarantees that, as we've seen last year.
I mean, it's not always the case, but last year, yes, the song that closed semi-final 1 was Cha 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 by Carrier, which won its semi. The song which closed semi-final 2 was Promise by Voyager, which also won its semi. Historically, this is not always the case, but it does look likely that that will once again repeat itself, at least on this semi-final. And I do believe the Netherlands indeed will win it because it is televote only, even if they do not win the whole contest, potentially to a song also in the semi-final, just like we had last year with semi-final 1 with Carrier finishing first and Loreen finishing second. But overall, I think this is a fantastic entry. I think it's going to do really well, and I think the Netherlands can be really, really proud of themselves.
So thank you for listening there to all our thoughts on the songs of the second half of the second semi-final of this year's Eurovision Song Contest, which is taking place in Malmö on the 7th, 9th and 11th of May. That is not far away. Today is the 29th of April, so it is very, very close. Rehearsals are already in full swing, so it is all really coming together, and we're very excited heading into this next week. But of course, we'll be back tomorrow when we cover the first of the big 5, which for us will be the French entry. So come back tomorrow for that. And if you want to stay all up to date, you can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, or wherever else you might get your podcasts. And that includes YouTube, where you can subscribe to us, leave a comment down below, or give us a like. You can also interact with our Q&As on Spotify. So thank you so very much for listening, and remember to vote for the music.
This is to music first, always.
We are unstoppable.
Open the frontiers to make people meet people.
Music is not fireworks. Music is feeling.
You're good to go.
Thank you both for the music!
This is Vote for the Music, the Eurovision podcast.